Hello and welcome back once again to the Awakening Philosophy podcast. My name is Jed and we are exploring what exactly the excellence of our souls are, what we call virtue. What's the best we can be? And can it be taught? So Socrates has been asked that question by our friend Meno, and we are wondering that question. We are going to see whether or not Socrates is able to teach Meno. And if he isn't, well, can we do better? Can Socrates teach us what virtue is? And because virtue is the excellence, we can do something we always love to do in philosophy is push the implications. How far can you take it? What's the absolute best you can think of? Well, if we are talking about the excellence of our soul, and we've been taught by Socrates, would that excellence include being able to teach it to somebody else? In which case, not only are we learning from Meno to see whether or not he can learn, and if we can't, can we do better? We're learning from Socrates. Because if there is such a thing as virtue, and it can be taught, then it's likely, well, Socrates is the one who's doing it for us, demonstrating it. So we're also learning from Socrates, because if we do get this mysterious thing called virtue, can we share it with our friends? So that's where we are in the text. Now, I hope you have your coffee with you and you're ready to go. My cup is empty. It is lacking the excellence of a coffee cup, because a coffee cup has to be filled with coffee. So I am going to pause the recording and I'll be right back. All right, and we're back and I have my coffee. The coffee mug is doing the excellence of a coffee mug. So what is excellence? What is the virtue of our soul? What's the best we can be? And how do we get there? Can it be taught? And curious question for me. Some might say I'm a bit weird, but I've always wondered, how come people don't ask this question? Why people have a bunch of hours in the day and they run around doing things. How come nobody asks what's the excellence of the soul? It's a puzzle I've had my whole life. People are pouring a lot of energy into doing different things without asking the first question: what should we be pouring our energy into? What's the best we can do? What's our excellence? What's the highest out there? Now you might say, well, some people don't ask that question because they've been so well indoctrinated into their family, school, culture, or religion, or what have you, and they are given an answer. The best you can be is someone who prays every day to Jesus. The best you can be is someone who makes those big bucks. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there, and the best you can be is at the top of that corporate ladder. Or a lot of people have the belief the best you can be is a fascist, because we all really secretly want to be fascist, don't we, our fellow right-wingers? So we'll support someone who tells it like it is and says, I want to be a fascist and have all the money and do harm to people I don't like and never pay my workers and abuse women and we like that guy because he's telling the truth, because we all secretly want to be like that, don't we? Because that's the best we can do. Fulfill all our desires, no matter what, and have the power to enact our anger on people we don't like and be able to get away with it. That's really the best you can do. And anyone who says otherwise is a liar. So even though I secretly know the priest at the end of my street is lying to people, I respect him and I'll go along with it, because maybe one day I can be a preacher myself and use people's naive beliefs to get what I want. A lot of people think that. In fact, our friend Meno thinks that. Virtue is to be able to do good to your friends and harm your enemies and get away with it. Now, there's another idea of virtue that Meno expounds when he tries to use the paradigm of giving a definition, a paradigm of understanding the dialectic. He says, he quickly abandons the paradigm and says, here is a quote from somebody who I like too. To desire beautiful things and to be able to get them. Different, but not much different, is it? Be good to your friends and harm your enemies. Well, that's what you're doing to other people, but what about what do you want? Beautiful things. I want to get all the beautiful things. Now, Socrates helped him in something we call the dialectic. So, we are wondering what virtue is because Meno certainly doesn't know it. Socrates has given us a few definitions. It's actually something that exists eternally as an eidos in being, which is great for us because that means it's universal. And Socrates helped him see that as well. So one of the problems we have in our world is people are throwing around their personal opinions and start wars and live their life based on their personal opinions. And we just mentioned, how come nobody seeks virtue? Well, everyone has their own personal opinion influenced by various things. But we're not interested in personal opinions, we're interested in truth. So it's great that virtue is one of those eidos in being because that means it's true. And as we read in the Phaedo, Socrates was very clear that, hey, if you want truth, you have to reach being. That's where truth lies. And the opening to the Parmenides says the same thing when Socrates was a baby. Not a baby, a 19-year-old. So at the beginning and the end of Socrates' philosophical life, the point was made, if you want to reach truth, you have to reach being. Difficult for a lot of people in our culture because we're not, we don't often talk about the realm of being. In fact, most people dismiss it. There is no such thing. All we know is the physical world. You don't see somebody on a sitcom wandering in and say, oh, by the way, have you wondered about being today? No, they say, have you wondered about physical things? Every episode of the sitcom, it's a new physical thing to wonder about. Ross's new car or Rachel's new boyfriend or something like that. Or Chandler's new job. Physical things. Very rarely is there a character on Friends who walks in and says, hey, what about truth and being? Have you reached it today? Have you experienced the realm of pure being today? Now they should add a character in there. If you're watching this and you produce a sitcom, make sure that character is in there. So because it isn't at the moment, it can be difficult for us to grasp the realm of being. And because of all of the translations of Socrates have been, what's a polite way of saying piss poor? Garbage? Garbage. It's garbage. They've all been garbage. That most of the words, most of the keywords have been retranslated from words that refer to being to words that refer to the physical world. So it's no surprise that most of the niche philosophy shows on YouTube like Stoicism, because Stoicism takes a lot of the language from Plato and Socrates and reframes it in terms of the physical world. So a good Stoic philosophy is to have courage, which means to be a big tough guy, or to have temperance, which means to physically repress your bad desires and things like that. Now, the virtues are so that we can reach being, but this is kind of left out by Stoic philosophy. It's just good for its own sake. To live this kind of battle with yourself kind of Stoic virtue is good for its own sake. You don't actually get anywhere. There's no actual goal. There's no eternal realm of being that you're here to see, in which you can perceive the nature of eternity and truth and also virtue, because virtue is one of those eidos. So, big sea change needed. That's why we have this philosophy. That's why it's called Awakening Philosophy. Because we have to awaken to the fact that philosophy isn't about pointing to physical things that we have opinions about or like and dislike, like Meno, or beautiful physical things we might desire, like Meno. It's about understanding truth, which is universal, and Socrates is making that point too. It has to be, otherwise you couldn't have a virtuous slave or child or elderly person, or it would be a different virtue for men and women. There wouldn't be a definition of virtue. Now, this was the arguments that Socrates helped us see. In his first definition of virtue, which of course is one of the eidos that you keep, so eidos, one of the aspects of this realm of being, that you keep your eyes fixed on when you ask questions and answer them. In other words, when you use the dialectic. His second definition of virtue, using again the dialectic, was how do you use virtue? Well, we talked about, someone who's virtuous can manage things well. Meno says a man manages the city, a woman manages the house. Of course, we would call that sexist today, and because it is. And Socrates says, hang on a second, that doesn't make sense either. It's the same virtue for men and women, and slaves, and children, and old people, all of whom don't manage any cities. So what is virtue? It's managing yourself. How do you manage yourself? Now, he also mentioned, in what way? Well, you have to have justice. You have to be doing it in a fair way. And you have to have temperance, or you have to have an even keel. You can't fly off the handles, go around punching old people because you've lost your temperance. That's not managing yourself well. There's a certain balance and cool-headedness. And if you manage yourself in that way, you'll be able to reach the good of whatever it is you're doing. The good of running a city, the good of running a house, or the good of managing yourself. Now, part of the good of managing ourselves is figuring out what is virtue. How can you be a good human if you don't know the purpose or the goal or the destiny? How can you play a game if you don't know what the purpose of the game is? Imagine playing Mario Brothers and you stayed in the first screen because you thought of the purpose of the game was to jump up and down a lot, and you didn't go and rescue any princesses. Same thing for us humans. So, knowing the good and being able to reach the good. And if you do that, you will always be acting justly. So, we put the two together, using the dialectic with our mind focused on being is virtue. Use that to manage yourself at all times, which is justice, and keep your cool even in the ups and downs of life. You will be far more likely to reach the good and have success. Well, the two come together. You will successfully reach the good. For us, the good of managing the self. And then the next part was Socrates giving us a division. Well, let me break down this dialectic further. Let me give you a dialectic to define shape and color. And let me even give you a demonstration of how the dialectic is used in geometry. Anyone who's had a look at Euclid's elements of geometry might recognize these. That's what he's using. And again, I've said it before, but if there's enough interest shown in the channel, we can get into Euclid's geometry once there's enough people who want to play, because it is a really succinct use of the dialectic to build up a complete understanding of geometry. And it's rare because it's one of the systems of understanding in the physical world that is almost complete. So it's a fantastic experience and demonstration of complete understanding as far as you can get without incorporating being, which is philosophy. But also every single element is a mini dialectic. So you're practicing the dialectic. And at the end of every proposition, we are going to make a equilateral triangle. just using a few definitions and a few rules that we have. In other words, all we can do is use a compass, which makes a circle, and a ruler, and that's all. Using a compass and a ruler, we're going to create all of geometry, two-dimensional geometry at least. It's amazing. And so the first proposition is to make an equilateral triangle, and you start puzzled and confused. You follow the steps of the dialectic, and you end up with an insight and an ability. You have leveled up. Harry Potter can use his magic wand, or he can cast the Furiosa spell. I don't know. I haven't watched a lot of Harry Potter, but I think that's a spell. Maybe it's Leviosa. Anyway, so at the end of every proposition, you have a new ability, and you have an insight, which is the purpose of the dialectic. The purpose of the dialectic is giving you an ability to function, giving you an insight, but specifically, as Socrates has helped us to see in this text, an insight about truth, about being. So every proposition you do in Euclid's geometry is a practice for enlightenment, because enlightenment is that process. To have a question about the nature of being itself, outside of time and space, of course, if it's a principle that's universally true. Follow some sort of step or procedure to make use of your wonder and curiosity, using your highest understanding, something that a lot of spiritual traditions lack, but that's okay. We can maybe, if virtue is teachable, we can go to these different people who reject understanding and say, oh, maybe you want to put understanding into your tradition too, and help them learn virtue. Nevertheless, what is enlightenment? Well, having a question about truth and being, or the excellence of the soul, following some sort of structure, using your highest understanding to come to a conclusion, that's the dialectic, about one of those things, aspects of being. What is beauty itself? What is eternity itself? What is goodness itself? Or what is virtue itself? Wink, wink. Giving you a conclusion and understanding, but also an ability to use it. Now you can make an equilateral triangle wherever you want, and an insight into an equilateral triangle directly. In other words, you are ultimately, the dialectic uses this step of question, structured understanding, conclusion to facilitate an insight. We want those insights to be of the quality that we call nous, a direct experience of the realm of being. That's why it's called enlightenment. Or that's why these are called yogas. You could say the dialectic is the best yoga, or the complete yoga. Yoga is from the word yoke, which means to join with the realm of being. And that ability we have, thumbs up, within our soul to directly experience the timeless, the eternal, virtue itself, that's called nous. And nous is one of the words that has not been translated in all of the, whatever word we use for piss poor translations of Socrates up until now. Or garbage. All of the garbage translations we've had of Socrates up until now have not translated the word nous. They have used English equivalents, which have been garbage because the English definitions of those words are different. We don't use knowledge to mean a direct, immediate insight and full experience of the realm of being. Knowledge and enlightenment are two different words in English. So, garbage. And the fact that we translate nous, which we've just defined, as knowledge, when you can have knowledge about how to fly a plane or how to fix your car, then that is a very good example of the way in which the translations of philosophy have been garbage. Taking the metaphysical about being, meta beyond physical, and retranslating it as though it's about physical world stuff like knowledge. Garbage. Not only garbage, but hilariously or coincidentally, the very problem our friend Meno has in this text. The tragic irony of his education is he never had a mystical experience or a experience of nous. So Socrates said, literally, we've read this, the tragic irony or the comedic tragedy of your education is you left before being initiated into the mystical experience. So what's not really an education, is it? You've just been parroting beliefs you either already hold or are held by your teacher Gorgias. Why? Learning isn't about picking up somebody else's dumb beliefs. Beliefs don't have to be true. Beliefs don't have to help anything. Everyone has rubbish beliefs. Welcome to the human race. Learning should be about something greater than false beliefs and harmful functioning. Education should be about creating the conditions for you to not believe someone else, but understand for yourself, and to actually wake up to the realm of being, actually experience nous, actually know something. Now, the word knows, okay. So let's not use the word know something. Actually, well, if we want to use the word know because that's the best equivalent, nearest equivalent in English, we'll have to say, well, the only thing you can know is nous. Because that's the object of knowledge, it's the object of nous. The only thing you can know is ousia or being. Ousia is to mean mind's ability to know itself. So nous is mind knowing mind. But the act of knowing is also the nature of mind. It's also ousia. So it's mind minding mind. And that's important because the object, the activity, and the thing being seen are all the same thing, allowing you to have a oneness or a direct apprehension all at once. So if ousia is the ability of self-reflection, you could also say it's ousia-ing ousia. Isn't that neat? I think so. Now, because we are using the dialectic to ousia, then in that experience, we'll be able to recognize things that otherwise would be hard to recognize. The same way, if you don't understand what a tackle is and what a scrum is and what a try is or a forward pass is, and somebody showed you a rugby game and you had a quick glimpse of a rugby game, like 30 big, angry, smelly men fighting each other in a ruck or a mall, you'd have a glimpse and you'd turn away and someone would say, what did you experience? I have no idea. It was a mess and it was scary and it seemed very violent and I want nothing to do with this rugby thing at all. Same thing with any experience. If someone threw you in the middle of a programming conference and you have no idea of the language of programming, big, horrible, smelly mess. Same thing with everything, same thing with being. There are many ways people have had glimpses into the realm of being or enlightenment experiences or encounters of ousia, but without the understanding, it could be a big, scary mess. And even if you're fortunate enough not to have any fears about it, a lot of people do. Growing up, the occult is scary. And there are demons and devils who want to hurt you, and these sorts of things. Or death is something to be feared because there's a thing called hell. These are all things that can make the experience very scary because you're experiencing something literally non-physical, so out of body. Literally spiritual. So if you've been told, Harry Potter is spiritual, that's the scariest thing, you mustn't watch it, then it can be a very scary experience. But if you're fortunate enough not to have any of those sorts of scary beliefs, still, you won't recognize what's going on. Fortunately, we're not suffering from that. If there is a sort of virtue of excellence, not only does it have to involve eidos or being, eidos is an aspect of being. There are many aspects of ousia that we can recognize. It's beauty itself. It exists, so it's pure existence. It's timeless, so it's eternity. Also, it's virtue, which is cool. So hopefully you've done some work in this text with us and you'll be like, oh, I'm really looking for virtue when I have that experience. To gain a direct apprehension of the ideal of virtue. That, as Socrates says, you can keep your eye on as you ask people questions about what they're doing, like Socrates is. Ask yourself when you wonder about things. Keep your model of excellence in mind. So that's where we're headed. That's what Socrates has outlined for us so far. Oh, and you use that model to manage yourself. Can you manage yourself in such a way where you can make it most like your highest experience of nous or being? Now, for those reasons, doing Euclid can be fun. It's a practice of dialectics. I don't know. Question. I don't know how to make an equilateral triangle. Method. Oh, here are the steps of the dialectic applied to some key definitions and some key rules. Compass and a ruler. Or compass and a ruler. And then we follow the steps. Hopefully with friends. That's why I'm, philosophy isn't a one-person game. It's not a solo quest. So too geometry. So once we have enough friends on board, we might get into it. And then you finally come to an insight where you have an understanding now, and you might have a sudden awakening into the nature of a triangle or a square or something. Now, the thing is, and by the way, and then you have to demonstrate it to somebody else. So you get an understanding, you get a direct insight, and you have an ability to function with it. 3 big things. Now you might say, well, one's a definition, one's a demonstration, one's an ability to divide it up. You walk away more dialectic like yourself. So it's a practice of the same method we use in philosophy, but also you gain an understanding of geometry, which is fun. You'll be able to understand all of geometry. And hey, maybe you'll see the world differently. If you have a complete understanding of geometry, maybe that'll affect the way you perceive the world. So that's geometry. And we'll get into that on the channel if we have enough people showing an interest. Join the Discord, join the like and subscribe to YouTube, follow along on Twitch. And Socrates used Euclid as an example of dialectic in the text. Right? What's shape? Well, here is a definition from Euclid of this, and here's another definition. Let's put the two together, come to a conclusion, take that conclusion back to our question, and now we have a definition of what shape is. So after Socrates gave a definition of virtue, what it is in eidos, how do we, and that was a dialectic he used for that, and then gave us another dialectic of how it demonstrates, how it functions. Then he divided the dialectic up into geometry, shape, and color as examples. And then he came to a conclusion. This is the paradigm for how you can understand something, a paradigm for how you can come to a definition. One of the biggest problems we have as a human species is ain't no one able to give a definition. I'm all about family. Well, can you give a definition of family? Shut up. I am all about ending wokeness. What's the definition of wokeness? Screw you. I'm all about freedom. Oh, okay. What's freedom? The freedom for me to punch you in the nose when you ask me questions like that. Seems irrational and immature. Yes, that's where we are. So if we want to recognize that's where we are as a species and as individuals, we need to figure out, well, how do we learn how to actually be mature and rational? How do we learn the virtue of our souls? That's why we're reading. So, was Meno able to use this paradigm to how to come to a definition, a paradigm that we also want to learn, so we are not having conflict within ourselves? So when you say to yourself, oh, I'm really not good enough, I'm a stinky self. Oh, what's the definition of self? What? What's the definition of a bad or stinky? Well, let's see if it's true. So we'll be able to challenge our own, especially if we have ideas about excellence like Meno. How do we come to an understanding so we can relate better to ourselves and to each other? So what did Meno do with this paradigm? He threw it out the window. Yoink. No, we don't say yoink anymore. We say yeet. He yeeted it out the window.
Wow. I don't want to eat a monkey.
And he just quoted a poet he liked. Seeking beautiful things, desiring beautiful things, and having the ability to acquire it. That's the best you can be. To like beautiful things. And of course, it's kind of funny because who wants ugly things? Everyone seeks beautiful things. That doesn't make sense. Socrates helped him out. By beautiful, do you mean good? Yes. And we just came to a conclusion that if that's your definition, to seek good, desire good things, and to be able to get them, then you can't distinguish different people as more or less excellent based on the first part, because everyone desires good things. The difference is whether or not people have an understanding, or the word was recognition, or whether they've been led to believe. Now, we've said, hey, one of the problems with our society is nobody can recognize the truth. No one can understand. People are just throwing beliefs around. I believe in this. Well, I'm going to vote for you. I believe in this God. Well, okay, well, I'm going to genocide you. Or I'm going to do a genocide against other gods. I don't know. That's what we are. So, big deal, because belief can lead you to believe that the bad thing is actually good. And we say, yeah, that's marketing. That's capitalism. That's, what do we call that? Advertising. That's propaganda. That's political campaigning. At the time of recording, I had to vote yesterday, and the people working at the voting place were very confused because I asked them, okay, which politician that I'm choosing from gives more money to the people and less money to the overseas billionaires? It's a big problem in Australia. There are a bunch of overseas billionaires who are just screwing over all of the Australian people and stealing all our resources, taking all of our resources and then selling them overseas so they can get rich, and then selling it back to us for way more than they are selling it out. So we pay the most for, we have our own resources, and strangely, we are paying the most in the world for the very resources that are our own. And they pay no tax and stuff. So these billionaires are picking our pockets and then selling us back to our watch. And strangely enough, the price for our own watch is far more than anyone else is paying for watches in the world. And it's really, really crazy. And so the politicians do that because they get kickbacks. There's something in the Australian political vernacular or language called the golden escalator. Most of these people realize that their job is to shill for those overseas billionaires, because once they do that and pass laws to serve them at the expense of the Australian people and the Australian environment, they'll get a cushy job at that very energy company or coal mining company that they have been selling their soul to. That's called the golden escalator. It used to be called the golden what are those turnstile doors that exist at some hotels? Okay, and I've looked up, I googled what is a revolving door called, and apparently they're called revolving doors. So there used to be the golden revolving door, where you go into politics, pass laws for some disgusting billionaire, and then you go work for him. Then he'd give you a $1 million salary for a few years, and then you get back into politics and pass more laws. It's really, really disgustingly corrupt. And of course, none of these people are actually benefiting by amassing more wealth than they can spend. None of them are benefiting by living in a world with polluted air and polluted water. None of them are benefiting by living around people who are suffering and the effects of living in a society where everybody is being exploited. And none of them are benefiting by living in these gated communities away from people and having their 15th yacht. So, and of course, their soul doesn't benefit because they're not on the hunt for truth, because all of their problems can be obfuscated by their money. And they can, in other words, like Meno, they can get away with it. And they can harm their soul by harming people they call their enemies, people who are opposed to their way of being and their disgusting wealth. And they are on the path to vice for their soul and not reach being, and it will have a negative effect on their development and what happens to their soul in the realm of being. So in other words, they are someone who has been led to believe that which is bad, amassing ridiculous wealth through capitalism, exploiting the political system, corrupting the souls of other human beings that we call politicians. They have been led to believe that's good when it's actually bad. They haven't recognized the truth about what virtue is. And in that sense, Socrates says you can't say people are more or less excellent based on whether or not they seek good things. Everyone seeks good things. Some have been led to believe the bad is good through belief, while others, if they have been fortunate enough to develop understanding, have recognized what is actually good. That's what we are doing. Therefore, part of virtue that we are carrying with us as we are solving this puzzle is, well, it must involve understanding and recognition for ourselves. And just like in geometry, at the end of each proposition, you recognize for yourself. And you have reached that recognition through understanding too. So at the polling office yesterday said, oh, by the way, who gives all the money to the people and who gives, well, not all, who gives slightly more money to people and slightly less to the billionaires? And they said, well, I don't know. Well, shouldn't that be the first thing you give people as you walk in? These are the 5 candidates. This is how much money they want to give to the billionaires. This is how much money they want to give to the people. And that can be in many different ways. You know, lowering prices for rent and food and, you know, public goods, community assistance, all sorts of things. But that should be like, there should be a page. And I said, well, they said, well, you can Google it. And that was a difficulty because what should be made clear is made murky. So part of this role of how do you lead people to believe the bad is good, you do something we call bullshit people. So instead of saying, I'm giving more money to the billionaires, they will say, I am making more jobs. Which kind of sounds good. No, we don't want people to be poor. But actually, what does that mean? Well, if you have $1 billion, it's, what are you going to do with it? Intrinsically, it has no value. Unless you can get people to do stuff for you. Build me a boat. Build me a swimming pool. Make me dinner. In other words, you have to have some sort of system where people will obey your desires because of the $1 billion that you have. What's that called? A boat builder, pool builder, a food cooker? Those are called jobs. So yes, by taking everything away from people and giving it to the billionaires, you are making more jobs because now we have to have jobs to have what we need to survive. And jobs are serving the people with money. That's what a job is. So you could say, well, I'm making more slaves. Yeah. But that's not made clear. That's a way of manipulating belief to confuse people to vote against their interests. Now, it's something that Socrates has helped us to see for ourselves. Don't have to believe anyone who says that. We can understand it. Now, so in that sense, everyone seeks the good. depending on how much understanding they have and how much manipulation through belief they have, they will have a better understanding of what is the good. If that's the case, someone is more or less excellent based on, what are the two parts of his definition of what is virtue? Seeking good things and being able to get that. Well, then people are if everyone seeks good things, then people are more or less virtuous, more or less excellent based on their ability to get good things. So that was the conclusion. The actual wording was, according to your logos, excellence or virtue is this: the power or ability or capacity. Why does that note never save? Oh, maybe I just can't see it on the page. There should be a note here. Hang on a second. I'm going to reopen my text. Because it was a definition, we got for ourselves an understanding and recognition of each of the words in the sentence. The translator said the power to, let's put it back up on the screen. I'll bring it up on the, what's this? Hang on. Bear with me for a second. Bear with me. There we go. Then I'll put that there. And then I'll just fix the blackboard. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'll bring it up. Here we go. According to your logos, virtue is the power to be able to provide good things. And the word provide is procure. So to get, the power or ability, the ability to get good. So it's not good things, it's just the good. And this word here, the power, skill, ability to get, procure, cause, provide the good. So everyone seeks the good. Oh, yeah. Okay. Everyone seeks the good. Okay. Now, how do I make these notes go away? Thank you, notes. I can see. And now go away, please. No, they're still on the board. Oh, one of them's gone. And the other one's still there. There we go. Hooray. Everyone seeks the good, so people are more or less virtuous or excellent depending on their ability or skill to be able to get good. Now, not good things, of course, because the good has a higher existence in reality, then you could say the good self, goodness in reality, or the good ideas, aspects of being, or good things in the physical world. Those are the three metaphysical levels of reality that we look at. So, now we have a refined definition of Meno's demonstration. Those good things, so the good, by the way, when you say the good, Meno, do you mean health and wealth? Now let's see if this is wealth. Because the word here is good. So Socrates could be inviting Meno to follow the paradigm and keep your eye fixed on things in being. So he says, so when he says, hey, by good things, do you mean health? Health is an eidos. He said that before. Health is the same for men and women and slaves and children. So it could be an eidos. Health could be one of those existing eternal ideas and ideals that we can use as a paradigm, whether we're making laws or whether we are managing the city, that is, or managing ourselves. And by the way, while we use managing the city or laws, As an analogy, often, because this helps us make sense of the physical world we're in, we have to recognize that Socrates defined the demonstration of virtue as managing the self. And he said, by the way, whatever you're managing, you'll be more able to reach the good of it and have success. So whether you're managing a city or a house or your Legos if you're a child, keeping your eye fixated on the aspects of being will allow you to do so with more success. But the word was self. Manage the self. So, wealth. Because Meno said, well, I mean gold and silver, physical wealth, and honors in the city, physical fame. So we recognize that as if you're not a philosopher-seeking being, you're going to fall into one of two categories, or both. Seeking money for your desires, to meet your physical desires, or seeking fame. One is called a philoklimatos, love of money, and other is philotimos, love of honor or fame. So, let us look up what is meant by the word wealth in the Greek for ourselves. And we can do it together. Here we go. Now I can bring up the internet. Here we go, here we go, here we go. I paste it in here for those playing along at home. Copy that, put it in Google. Pluton. What does Pluton mean? Put it in the Wikipedia, and in the Wiktionary says Pluton means wealth. Okay, doesn't really help us. Wealth or riches, treasures, metaphor of the whole earth. Corn. Of the whole earth, okay. Wealth. All right, wealth or riches. All right, so it could be. Doesn't have to be physical riches, because it can be used metaphorically also, apparently, to refer to the wealth of the whole earth. So when Socrates say, hey, do you call good, not good things, do you call good things such as health, which is an eidos, and wealth, which could be an eidos? In fact, let's go back, because he mentioned a bunch of examples of things that are eidos, which exist eternally, which are not different from men or women, or old or young. Okay? Here we go. Health and size and strength. Does it seem that there is one health for a man, but another? Why won't I zoom in? Why won't it zoom? What? Zoom in. There we go. Why can't I zoom in more with my little thing here? Alright, this is what I have to do. Does it appear that it's the same, that health and size and strength? Is it the same? For if a woman is strong, she will be strong according to the same eidos idea, capital I. It's not a concept. That's why we give it a capital. It's an aspect of being. The same eidos and the same strength. Okay, so he didn't mean wealth. He didn't say wealth. So we know that health and of course, size has to be an eternal being. Of course. Big and small can apply to anyone all over the world, all over the universe. Even an alien species can say, oh, that's bigger than that. So size has to be an eternal principle that's directly knowable in the realm of being, an eidos. So too for strength, so too for health. He didn't mention wealth, so we can keep that as a question because it could mean riches or it could be used metaphorically. So Socrates says, hey, when we say according on our new understanding of what makes people good are virtuous, the skill or ability to be able to get good. By good, do you mean health and wealth, or the things that can be eidos and being? And Meno says, well, I mean gold and silver. I am a physical world person. I am a materialist. I ignore the realm of being. Well, that's not learning. But it's really cool that Meno has given us a division or a demonstration of what was our judgment of him. And Socrates' judgment. Oh, I see. What you think it means to be knowing is to run around and answer everyone's questions very confidently. Just like the people in our world currently who claim to be experts or knowers. They're on every podcast, or they run for president, or they just throw their dumb opinions out as loudly as they can, and they think, well, surely the more loud I am and the angrier I am, the more knowing I am. Socrates recognized that way of being even in Meno, and Socrates isn't like that at all. So another idea of knowing can be to be able to apprehend the realm of being. That could be more virtuous. That could be a greater good than this imitation of what it means to be a knower. Loud and angry or whatever. So, do you mean those? No, I'm in the physical world. Okay, yeah. I suspected as much. Now, let's keep going. Very well, says Socrates, so I'll take what you give me and keep going. Surely then to be able to provide gold and silver is virtue. All right, what's our definition of virtue? To be able to provide the things you think are good. No, not think are good. To be able to provide the good. So then, what makes someone virtuous? The ability to get gold and silver, says Meno. The paternal guest friend of the great king. Now, what the hell does he mean? So he's probably mocking him a little bit, because obviously Socrates doesn't think that the excellence of our human soul is to get money. Clearly not. That's ridiculous. Even non-philosophers know the meaning of life can't be to get money. And clearly the people who spend their life seeking money are the kind of worst people ever. The Bezoses and the Musks and the Rupert Murdochs of the world, they are the most disgusting people. So, obviously he's wrong. But let's see what this expression means. So we're in 78D. So we can look at one of those garbage texts. The texts that we've been calling garbage. Not completely garbage, because they can help us by giving us a different phrasing that might help us make more sense of things that can be hard to understand with a direct translation of the ancient Greek. Or if it's just weird like this. I mean, we can read it. The paternal guest friend of the great king. But I have no idea what that phrase means. And sometimes a different translation might shed light on it. So let's jump into another text. Very well. Procuring gold and silver is virtue, according to Meno, the ancestral friend of the great king. Boom. All right, so No luck there. It's exactly the same. All right, so no luck on Perseus, which is the Loeb translation, the Fowler. But I can go into this. For those of you watching along, this is what a PDF used to look like back in the olden times. See, falling apart here, bit dusty. And this is probably regarded as the second best translation of Socrates after the Balboa. And I can look up the Meno. It's the Great Dialogues of Plato by Rouse. W.H.D. Rouse. A little bit closer to the truth than Loeb, and both Loeb and Rouse are in. So you can say, like, if you did a tier list of translations, Balboa would be S tier. Rouse and Loeb would probably be, maybe Rouse would be A tier. Loeb, which you can get for free on Perseus, is B tier. And the rest maybe C, D tier. Sorry for those people who read Benjamin Jowett because it's free online. But that's C or D tier. So let's go to A tier and find Meno. My little bookmark. Republic Symposium Meno. Meno, 78D. There is a footnote.
Wow.
So let's read it. Very well, says Socrates. To provide gold and silver is virtue, according to Meno, the family friend of the great king. Footnote, the king of Persia, the owner of fabulous riches. It was a joke. It was a little joking thing about Meno. So Meno's family is friends with, must be friends with the king of Persia. I don't know if his friends are. The king of Persia, known for all his money. Very rich fellow. Referred to also in the Alcibiades, because Alcibiades thinks Alcibiades is an Athenian dude who thinks he should be the ruler of Greece. And Socrates says, why? Why don't you, like, is it because you're rich? Because the king of Persia has more money than you. If you think your richness is going to help you beat our enemies like Persians, then you're outdone by the Persian guy. Anyway, so the great king refers to the king of Persia, who has a lot of money, gold and silver, and paternal guest friend. Yes. Okay, so paternal. So maybe your dad, like your family, is friends with the king of Persia. I don't know if this is if his family actually was. We did reference his family right at the beginning. Let's have a look. Gorgias was his teacher. His lover's family is the family of Aluus. He is a Thessalian. His lover is from Larissania. So if you know more about Meno and whether or not his family was actually good friends with the rich king of Persia, leave a comment. Otherwise, it's not really important. It could be a joke. I'm suspecting it's a joke. Or just a coincidence. Still a joke, but a coincidence. Hey, yeah, Meno thinks virtue is, good things are gold and silver. Yeah, good thing you say that, considering your family friends with the king of Persia. All right, that's fun. All right, so, but you're going to add to this a just and godly pious. So, this was, we talked about this last time. I can never remember. Euthyphro. Yes, Euthyphro, I think it is. Yeah. Euthyphro, because you're a bro with... if you're friends with the gods, you're a bro of the gods. And that's a way of remembering youth. Platonic text. E-U-T-H. Euthyphro. Yes, Euthyphro sounds a little bit like you're a bro. And Euthyphro is a text where Socrates talks to Euthyphro about what it means to be pious or like the gods or doing what the gods like. So sometimes it's referred to as a virtue, but it's kind of a vague reference to being divine. It's also mentioned within in a list along with the other virtues in the Phaedo, but it's not one of the four primary virtues, the four defined virtues in the Republic. Justice is, of course, dikaios, but pious, which is pronounced dikaios is how you pronounce justice in the Greek, which is a bit funny. Osios, which kind of looks like oasis. Osios is the Greek for O-S-I-O. Yes, osios is pious. So, by the way, getting gold and silver like your family friend, the Persian king. Do you want to add getting it in a just and osios way? Or does it make no difference whether you can procure them unjustly? Do you call unjust attaining of gold and silver virtue? No, I call it, do you call it vice? Entirely so, without a doubt. So, justice. Sophrosoon, sound-mindedness or temperance. Osios, how do you say piousness? How do you say piousness? Osiotita. To be osios is pious, like Oasis. Oasis, the most holy of all of the British rock bands. Osios. And if you are talking about it as a noun, as a piousness as a noun. Osiotita. Oasis plays rock music because sometimes if they play a good show backstage, they will get a bit of tita. Like tittering, like you're joking. They make jokes. They go backstage after the show and they make jokes with each other, and sometimes they titter. That's how an Oasis, a band member, that's how Noel and Liam Gallagher laugh. They go Ocio tita. That's creating imagery as a mnemonic device to remember something, which is what Socrates has been talking about earlier when he talks about keeping your eye fixed on being when you do question and answers. Unless you've had a direct experience of being, you have to, unless you're in one, you have to have some sort of memory of it, using your imagination or your memory to recall it as an image. So we ask, how do we remember something new like osiotita? Use your imagination to create images that will help you bring it to memory. So that's part of learning. That's part of philomathesis. and part of the next stage, philosophy, which is the dialectic. So if you read Plato, he said, like, for example, in the cave analogy, he says, imagine a cave, and then he describes it. He wants you to create this image in your mind. It's a mnemonic device. But also a training for the insight. If you keep your mind fixated on these things in being that we are building an understanding of, it starts as an image that you build on as you go through and follow Socrates, everything he says, helping us build an image. Then that opens your mind to the direct experience of the thing, which is really important, that we are unlike Meno and not fixated on gold and silver, unlike the king of Persia, because if you spend your life like a banker or a Wall Street dude or a capitalist fixated on money, you are still meditating. We can't not be meditating. We can't not be philosophers doing a dialectic. Only their object of meditation is something physical, gold and money, that can't be directly apprehended in the experience of nous or ousia. In other words, ain't no enlightenment for those bozos. What Parmenides would say, and Socrates will say, they won't reach truth, which is the worst defect of the soul, because that's literally what we're here for, says Socrates and Parmenides. Socrates, a teacher. So, good thing that we are fixated on virtue. Good thing that virtue is one of the aspects of being, meaning the more we build up an imagination of it, as we add pieces to it in our understanding, we are creating an imagination that we can fix our attention of as we use the dialectic and understanding, which means at the end of it, we can have something called contemplation. We can actually join with our object of focus. Focus, sustained concentration, we've talked about. Sustained concentration is meditation. Sustained meditation on something which is directly apprehendable in the realm of being is contemplation, meaning this spiritual initiation that Meno missed out on because of his crappy education, which we missed out on in our current culture because of our crappy education, treating us like prisoners and slaves to blindlessly take on beliefs that will allow us to blindlessly spend our lives making billionaires richer at the destruction of our own happiness, wealth, the equality of our community, our own happiness, and the survival of our species. That's our crappy education. What we sacrifice is spending our days focused on things that are aspects of being, allowing us to reach truth, allowing us to reach our destiny, allowing us to come together as a human species with shared understanding, because understanding is universal, principles are universal, being is universal, putting an end to war and disharmony and inequality and suffering. But also, if we spend our days meditating, concentrating, building an understanding, building an image in our imagination of being, we can upgrade from meditation to contemplation, because we can directly join with it and have nous, have ousia. We can, for ourselves, experience the nature of reality. Enlightenment, you could call, if you want to make it fancy, but it's just knowing. It's just education, real education. Before the Catholic Church came in 539, I think it was 29 AD, and shut down the academy, burnt the libraries, brought in what we call the Dark Ages, and tried to replace this kind of understanding for faith, which means to be led to believe by the guy who went around killing people, Emperor Justinian. What he thinks, his crappy interpretation of the various different other people who themselves all have their own levels of interpretation about Jesus or whoever. Interpretations of interpretations of interpretations, many levels of stupid beliefs. I don't apologize. You might not like to hear that because you might have been raised to believe that, oh, this person we are supposed to believe is a dear authority figure. But wake up, change your mind, learn for yourself, think for yourself, and benefit by not being led to believe anything. So you can't be tricked into thinking the bad is good. Understand for yourself, which is called being mature and rational. And if we're focused on something that we should be focused on, a universal aspect of being, a universal principle that's true for eternity, we can directly experience that and be like the gods. directly knowing the nature of self. That's what makes them gods. They are divine. In other words, they're outside of time and space. In other words, they're in being. So if we want to be like the gods, we are being osios tita. Is that how you say it? Osiotita. Osiotita, which is the subject of our bro, Eurobro, Euthyphro. So we play with that same principle in order to memorize fundamental or key ancient Greek words. The process of building the pieces together in our understanding and creating an imagination of that to help us recall it in memory. Now, thankfully for us, osiotita, or godlike, is one of those aspects of being. So we're also not just remembering it for our reading, we are putting the blocks in place in preparation for our own direct experience of being for ourselves. Don't have to believe anyone, which might be an aspect of freedom, by the way. So that's neat. Dick Chaos for justice, Sophrosyne for temperance or sound-mindedness, and Osiotita. The members of Oasis after a show get a lot of tittering. They titter at the jokes they made. They say, hey, Noel Gallagher. And the other guy says, yes, Liam Gallagher. Oasis sounds like, well, we don't have sisters. Maybe we should call ourselves Oa Bro. And then they go, hee 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 hee. That's an Oasis titter, or Oa titter, which is piousness or holiness, to be like the gods. Neat. So I hope you are practicing your imagination. And I teach music and guitar, by the way. So this is a big part of learning guitar, because the shapes that you learn on guitar, you have to somehow memorize, and you have to create imaginations about them, while also developing an imagination of what the logos of music is, because the principles in learning the guitar and music are aspects of being, because they're universally true. It's called the diatonic scale. Anyway, back to the text. So do you think it's reasonable that either justice, dikaios, sound-mindedness, sophrosyne, by the way, having this understanding helps us to recognize it for ourselves. It helps that we have a good translator, but we are recognizing dikaios, sophrosyne, and otiotita, or some other part, these are all parts of virtue, must accompany this provision, this getting of money. If not, it will not be virtue, even though it provides good things, like what you think is gold and silver. So you need to have, Meno says, without these, how could it still be virtue? If you are punching an old lady and taking her gold, that wouldn't be virtue. That wouldn't be like an oasis, owatita, or owatita, or osios. Then, not getting gold and silver, this aporia keyword, being at a loss, is also self-virtue when it is not just, neither for self and another. If the only way of getting this thing is not through having the parts of virtue, then not having it is actually justice. This is key for us, because when we say exercise the dialectic at all times, what we've defined as virtue so far, what we're working with so far, part of our image that we're building, Socrates said, yeah, managing the self using the dialectic at all times is justice. He didn't say being successful, just doing it, playing the game, doing your best. So encourage everyone to do their best. Whatever they're doing, try and apply the dialectic in conversation and thinking and learning the guitar, whatever it is you're doing. In reading the text that we've been doing, right, all the way through, we've been looking for parts of the dialectic. That's justice. Being at a loss, being confused, being puzzled, being stuck, that's still virtue. In fact, this being at a loss is a big part of it. When you start in your Euclid's geometry, before you can create an equilateral triangle, just using the five rules you have, including to make a straight line and to use a compass, you start in aporia. You start having no idea, how can I understand how to generate an equilateral triangles from scratch? Same thing with learning guitar. This is a big thing. Some of the students I have can play some chords, and I have to take them back because they have no idea what they're playing or why they're playing. And very quickly they get stuck. I don't know where to go next when I write my song. I like this G chord, but where do I go? All right, let's go back and understand why the G chord is the way it is. What are its parts? And how can you build a song for yourself, not imitating or copying or believing someone else, even if they're even if they're oasist and you love how they have a very holy nature, osios, and you love how backstage they make dirty jokes that make them titter, osio titter. And which means they have to be okay with aporia, being confused, not understanding, being at a loss, and going right back to the start. What's a single note? Why is a guitar note different from a piano note? How can we see all of music inherent in one note? You won't at the beginning. You need to be okay with aporia. Which is also why when you're learning anything, you have to also be doing philosophical midwifery. It seems like every episode we plug our other series, philosophical midwifery, because if you're not okay with being at a loss, being confused, then you can't start the learning process. If you're not okay with not knowing how to do an equilateral triangle, you can't learn it. If you're not okay with the fact that you don't know what is good and bad, you don't know virtue, Meno. Yeah, your teachers say one thing and your parents agree and your partner agrees, but that's baloney. If you're not okay with recognizing that you don't know it, how can you learn it? And if it's difficult for people learning guitar, how difficult do you think it is for professors of psychology or professors of philosophy or spiritual gurus who have all of these people around them, giving them money, giving them, what did Meno say? Money and titles and offices. Hey, you're a professor of philosophy. Hey, you have a psychotherapy office. Hey, you're the guru of this ashram. You're closer to God than all of us. You're a prophet. All of these people with a lot more gold and silver, a lot more offices and honors than even Meno has. How difficult it would be for them to admit they don't know the very things that have gotten them those things. That's Socrates. He talks to these people. Oh, you're a general. Do you know what justice is? You know what courage is? No. What do? They get mad. What happened at the end of Socrates' life? All these people who were too arrogant, egoistic, ignorant, that they couldn't allow themselves to be aporia, which was needed to be at a loss to acknowledge they don't know the things they claim to know so that they can learn from Socrates, went ahead and killed the guy. Try it. Go to some people who are maybe a politician or a teacher or maybe a head of philosophy in your college and say, hey, by the way, do you know that we haven't understood Socrates at all? In part because we haven't had a bad translation, in part because of the history of the Roman and Latin tradition that we are inheriting, which burned these people, burned the libraries, shut down the academy. And do you know that actually philosophy is the paradigm of the spiritual discipline? Because the dialectic, which is our model of understanding, is focused on the aspects of being, meaning if you do it well, you'll be able to directly apprehend it, and that's nous. So every philosophy lesson should include meditation, or is a meditation. Try telling that to someone who has honors and offices in your college and gets their acquisition of gold and silver in that way. What will they say? Just try it, let me know. Put comments in the chat. By the way, if they say, shut up, get out of here, we don't talk about that, or you're going to lose a grade, or you're going to get yelled at, or any of these sorts of things, then you can turn around and say, hey, by the way, you think it's just to have the money and it's excellent for excellence, it's a virtue for you to be teaching philosophy at this college and get money from it? Or maybe even teaching philosophy you think is a virtue? If you don't, do you think you can acquire these things in an unvirtuous way and it can still be virtue? In other words, if I am raising a legitimate point about philosophy that's true, and you are being, and you're not being osiotitos, not being pious about addressing it, if you're not addressing it with justice or fairness, then is that really virtue? Because you are being unjust and unvirtuous in your acquisition of your honor, your title, your money as a teacher of philosophy. And by the way, if you're reading along with the philosophical midwifery book, you can make the same statement to psychotherapists. Psychotherapy, being a young tradition, is eclectic. There is no model yet. There's picking and choosing, like the way Meno pick and chooses virtue. In other words, it doesn't have a paradigm built on being. That's what philosophical midwifery is. That's why the title of the book is called The New Paradigm of Solving Human Problems. So, try it out. Let me know how you go. By the way, speaking of the philosophical midwifery book, the author of that book, Dr. Pierre Grimes, I've seen him do that to students. In his class, he would say something that's wrong, obviously wrong. He would, write the thing on the board. They would have learnt something, and then he'd go around and say the opposite. One example was, maybe not that one. Okay, one thing in our culture is, in order to justify oppression of women, the pathologos that men have to pretend that they're virtuous by oppressing women, is the Adam and Eve story. We have sinned because of something that Eve lied to Adam and told him to eat the apple when God said he shouldn't, and the snake, representing the devil, tricked her. Now, I've seen him in a class read the actual words, similar to the way we're reading, learning how to read here, which says the opposite. Eve didn't trick Adam. The snake was telling the truth. The guy that was being the biggest jerk was the God figure in the Adam and Eve story. So we would read it for ourselves, and then he'd turn around to the class and say, and therefore, we should blame women for the creation of sin. And that's why we got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, which also isn't in the text. But is what we're told, what the whole class has been told growing up. And so he would say that, and then one person stuck her hand up and said, no, that's not true. That's not in the text. They lied to us. Everyone else was like, oh, I can't imagine my beloved priest or pastor lying to me. One of them got very angry. I'm going to talk to my pastor about this. Very angry and certain, like Meno. Anyway, the teacher said, Pierre would say, how dare you question the teacher? You're going to get a bad grade if you do that. And so she put her hand down. The next day, similar thing happened. She stuck her hand up. Said, excuse me, that's not right. But you're going to get a bad grade. She said, I don't care if I get a bad grade. In other words, getting the good thing, whether it's a grade or gold and silver, isn't actually a good thing, isn't actually virtue or excellence if you didn't acquire it in a good way. In other words, if you get a good grade because you lie to the teacher about what's true, because that's what he wants, then what's your grade worth? Garbage. It's garbage. If you do a translation of Socrates, former translators, and you put in the ideas of evil and you take away all the references to nous and being, because that will appease your employer who's hired you to do it, or the king who's a Christian or Catholic king or whatever and doesn't like anything that challenges their beliefs. What's your translation worth? Garbage. And by the way, after she said, I don't care if I get a bad grade, Pierre said, well, okay, maybe you won't get a bad grade, but maybe, I don't know, maybe you'll get thrown out of the class or something. I don't know, something else. Every day she would like put her hand down and then come back the next week and say, I don't care about this thing. It's very strange to see in real time. So, getting the good thing in a non-good way isn't virtue. And aporia, being at a loss. Now again, aporia is one of those words Socrates used that's multi-dimensional. Not having money is a kind of physical aporia. Not having virtue is a big one. Recognizing you have a question, a puzzle you don't know. Virtue is a big one for this text because Meno wandered in thinking he knows and he doesn't. How well is he going to learn if he thinks he knows? How well is that politician going to learn the truth about being and how to manage a city if he doesn't recognize he's ignorant? But how will I get elected if I don't pretend I know stuff? Same thing to the capitalist or the economist, the financial guru. By the way, do you realize you're ignorant about the nature of what is actually good and just for the city and for our financial well-being? No, I went and studied finances for 10 years and I use these very big words that make people think that I'm smarter than them and they can't challenge our injustice using money to exploit people. But being at a loss, aporia, recognizing you don't know the justice, recognizing you don't know the truth about governing, about finances, about virtue, is actually self-virtue. If the way that you think you have the thing is nonsense, or you acquired those things in a bad way. Being a billionaire ain't good, Jeff Bezos, if you are getting that money by exploiting your workers. But that's capitalism. So, hey, all you billionaires, read the Meno and do better. Be at a loss, because being at a loss, recognizing you don't know, will allow you to change, which might be exactly what you're here to do for your soul. All right, it's no coincidence that most people are born into their wealth. Why would you choose a life where you were born rich? Seems like a bigger challenge to be okay with being a pariah. If you've got all this money and you have all these slaves telling you, hey, you are so wise, boss, you deserve to be a billionaire. Like, look at Elon Musk. He's so ignorant and stupid. But no one is willing to say that. Everyone laughs at his dumb jokes. Now he's so delusional, he thinks he's a genius. And he thinks he's funny. He ain't. In other words, it's going to be a lot more difficult for someone born into his wealth to be okay with aporia, which is actually self-virtue. So why did he choose this life? That's a question for him. He chose a challenge. So those people who are in those positions where they have a lot of honors or gold and silver, you've chosen a challenge for your soul because it's going to be a bigger challenge for you to be a pariah. Just as Meno has a challenge, he comes from a wealthy family. His family is friends with the king of Persia, who also values gold and silver. He's paid a lot of money for his education from Gorgias. How willing will he be to be completely at a loss, a pariah? By the way, that's okay. Being at a loss, being unaware, is also virtue. Provided you're seeking those good things in the right way. Not knowing how to make a triangle is virtue, provided you are doing the first proposition of Euclid to understand how to do it for yourself. Going back to playing a single note on the guitar and being completely confused and even irritated that I'm not doing chords right now is virtue. Virtue of learning is what we are reading here. Therefore, the way of getting is no more than, getting stuff is no more than not having stuff of these kinds of goods. Both will be virtue. So having gold and silver is, or not having it is no more virtue. That when it comes to being justice, coming to be with justice will be virtue, and that which comes to be without any of these real beings, reiteration, we're focused on beings, the real beings of dikaios, justice, sophrosoon, sound-mindedness, osiotita, holiness. If you don't get your things by doing it in that way, and by the way, how do we define managing with justice? The dialectic. If you get things without it, it's vice. So, the ends justify the means. Ain't gonna cut it, Bezos. Netanyahu. Ends justify the means. Nonsense. Because, hey, to be completely at a loss, aporia is actually justice and self-virtue, provided you're trying to act with justice at all times. It appears to me that it must necessarily be, as you say, appearance. Then, is it not the case then that we said a little while ago that each of these are a part of virtue? Justice, sound-mindedness, osiotita, and all such as these. Yes. Are you playing with me then, Meno? What do you mean, Socrates? Because even though I pleaded not to break up virtue or excellence, and even though I gave you the paradigm to give a single definition, according to which you must answer, you failed to pay attention to this and tell me that virtue is the ability to provide good things along with justice. Then do you say this is a part of virtue, justice? Yeah. Then is it not the case then that it results from that which you agreed upon, that this is virtue? To do whatever one does with a part of virtue. What's virtue? To do whatever you do with a part of virtue. But, for you say that justice and each of these are a part of virtue. Why then do I say you're playing with me? Because of my pleading to tell me about the whole of virtue. So you are far from explaining what self is. Whereas you say that every act is virtue, if indeed performed with a part of virtue. This answering, just as you have already acknowledged for me what the whole of virtue is, you're answering this as though you've told me what the whole of virtue is. What's virtue? Doing whatever you do with a part of virtue. Well, what's virtue? You haven't told me what the whole of virtue is. What's good? Doing whatever you do with a part of goodness. What's good? Just having a part of goodness in what you do. What's good? You cut it up into parts. Cut self into parts. Therefore, as it appears to me, we must start from the beginning. From the same question, O friend Meno, friend, what is virtue? If every act performed along with a part of virtue will be virtue. For this is what it means when someone says that every act performed along with justice is virtue. What's virtue? Doing everything you do with justice. Which is, by the way, managing yourself with the dialectic. But isn't justice a part of virtue? Does it appear to you that there is no need to start again from the same question? But do you think that anyone can know whatever virtue is when they don't know self? In other words, there's two levels here. You haven't defined self as a whole, virtue itself. So can anyone ever know what virtue is if they don't know it as a single definition itself? And there's another way of reading this, which seems to fit better. Do you think anyone can know what virtue is if they do not know self? See, you can read this. Do you know what virtue is if you don't know what it is? That's kind of a tautology. You're repeating yourself. It's redundant. So why does he say, can you know what virtue is if you do not know self? There's a clue for us. If we recognize this is redundant. He's already said, what is virtue? Performing with a part of virtue will be virtue. Or doing something with righteousness is virtue, with justice is virtue. He's already said that. Why is he saying, how can anyone know whatever virtue is if they don't know what it is? That sentence is a tautology. It's redundant. And he's already said we need to know it as a whole. So what's the significance? What's the clue? And we have to look for these things that stand out. That's the game. Look for the parts that stand out or don't fit, which is easier to do if you know the paradigm. It's easier to recognize Meno doesn't know what he's talking about. It's easier to recognize that Meno isn't able to give a definition if we know the paradigm of what it means to have a definition. He just quoted a poet he liked, or a prophet he liked, or a holy book he liked. If you know the paradigm, it's easy to see deviations from it. If a doctor knows the paradigm of a healthy body, it's easier for him to recognize deviations of sick bodies. Oh, your lung is in the wrong place. How did you know? Because I know the ideal, the paradigm. Same too for us. Because the better we learn the paradigm of defining things, the dialectic, the easier it is to recognize where people are missing the mark, where they are stuck, where they're having problems. That's key for us to function like a doctor for the soul, which might be excellence of the soul, not having excellence for ourselves, not only having the excellence for our soul, but to be able to function with it, to help others who are stuck. If we know the paradigm of the dialectic, we can recognize why and where they are missing the mark in failing to have an understanding, failing to have a good definition, to be able to have any definition of virtue. So as you go and talk to these gurus of the ashrams and the Buddhist temples, if you go and talk to Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, if you go talk to Netanyahu and Donald Trump, and you say, hey, by the way, do you know what enlightenment is? Or do you know what fairness in the economy is? Do you know what justice is? The greater you are familiar with the dialectic, the more you recognize where any of these people miss the mark, because they're all missing the mark. We've been seeing that for ourselves. How well can they be put into a state of aporia is to do with virtue, how virtuous they are. No, I'm never wrong. I have all these followers. I have all these weapons. I have all this money. How could I be wrong? Okay, they're not okay with being in aporia. That's a problem they have. But if they are open enough to wonder and have that level of integrity, if you have a more accurate understanding and imagination, visualization of the paradigm, you'll be more able to recognize where they're missing the mark, where they're deviating. Just as Socrates has. Yeah, no joke, you can't give a definition, Meno. It's obvious, it's clear to him, to Socrates. And hopefully for us, the more we stay in it, the more we become like Socrates, the more we manage our reading justly through the dialectic, with an eye on or an imagination of being as we go, the more we will become like Socrates and virtuous ourselves, maybe. It's a hypothesis we carry. Nevertheless, the more we read in this way, with that paradigm in mind as we read, the more able we can recognize deviations. Just like the video game, the more you recognize there are 8 statues in the row, but one is facing the wrong way, or there's a deviation to the model, I'm supposed to turn that statue around, and then the secret door opens. Video games are like that. Now we can recognize a deviation to the model here. Do you think that anyone can know what virtue is if they don't know self? Doesn't quite fit, does it? Unless we solve the puzzle. If virtue is one of the real beings, or he actually said justice and sophrosun and osiotitos, justice and even-temperedness and holiness, godliness, are real beings. that which we're keeping our eye on, that which we're seeking. But he said, hey, we don't want the real beings, we want the whole of it. What does that mean? We want the whole of virtue. Let's highlight that. No. There we go. So this idea of virtue, if we have recognized it have parts, and if the parts are real beings, maybe, just maybe, hypothesis we carry as a question, because we're at a loss so far, but it's good that we're at a loss. It's virtuous that we're at a loss. Maybe, just maybe, this virtue thing we're seeking is the whole of the real beings. If the real beings are aspects, hey, welcome to the chatter. Welcome, wizard. Okay, let's repeat. If these aspects, justice, holiness, temperance, are real beings, but they are parts of virtue, and we want the whole of virtue, Socrates is saying the thing that we are seeking on this quest is the whole of being, the whole of Useeing. Welcome, Gabe. The whole of being, whole of Usia. Oh, Gabe Dub, who we used to chat on, you would stream that game? That looks like little Legos, a little bit like Warcraft. RuneScape streamer? Is that right? Am I thinking of somebody else? Yes, hooray. Welcome. So we've just discovered, just to bring up to speed, we're on page 14 of the Meno, free link to the text below, and we've been trying to learn the paradigm for how Socrates thinks and how we should be thinking and how to get a definition. And we also recognize that having a visualization of that paradigm helps our memory and also opens our mind up to be able to experience the metaphysical dimension, which is where truth lies, which is our goal as human beings. Because we see examples of beautiful things or just things in our physical world, but if we want to know the truth, we want to know what beauty itself is or justice itself is. And if we are able to do that, we'll be able to end any conflict within ourselves, and if we can do it as a species, we'll end any conflict within our race. Because if it's true, then it's open for everyone. Everyone can understand. If everyone can experience it directly, then that's the next evolution of our souls and our species. But also, by having an understanding of the paradigm for how to think and how to define and how to know real being, we're more easily going to be able to recognize deviations. So when Meno, who thinks he knows what virtue is, can't give a definition of it as a whole, oh, that's easy, because you're not using the paradigm, you're not using the dialectic, which has 4 stages, 4 parts, to come to a definition. And so time and time again, we've asked for a whole of definition of virtue, and he's been giving us a swarm of bees. Or we say, hey, give us a complete vase, and he smashes it on the ground and gives us a piece. Right now, his piece is, well, I'll tell you what virtue is. Doing anything you do, seeking whatever good that you think is good. So he's not even asking whether the thing that we're seeking is actually good, but doing anything you do, because anything you do, by definition, we have come to see every human being seeks what they think is good. There is a difference between people who've been led to believe something is good, because beliefs can trick you. You can be led to believe that the bad thing is good. That's marketing. That's politics. That's debate. But if you understand, you can recognize it for yourself. So that's important. But he's putting that aside. He's saying, okay, to seek good things, and the excellence or virtue of our soul is to seek good things, which is everything, and be able to get them. You're not really virtuous if you can't get the things that you think are good. So Socrates says, well, okay, well, being able to get them doesn't matter. Like, give me an example of good things. And Meno says, gold and silver and high honor and what did he say? Honor and offices, a good job, well respected and a good job. Okay, and it's a bit of a joke because none of these things are eternal things in being that we are here to reach, a kind of learning that we can take with us on a journey beyond this world. You can't take your Instagram likes or your job title out of this 80 years if you're lucky. So kind of stupid, but we'll run with it. Not a lot of people are aware that there's a realm of being that's eternal. All they are familiar with is their physical senses, bright colors and shapes and things, and they haven't done a lot of reflecting. Partly it's our history to blame. It's our part of history and our education. There aren't a lot of members of Friends who go on and while Ross is talking about his job, while Rachel is talking about her boyfriends, Chandler is making jokes. You don't have a character walking on and say, who's wondering about the eternal nature of being and how we should experience it directly right now. Don't have that character, so there are reasons why we don't talk about being. But nevertheless, that's a tragedy. We need to be initiated into that mystical experience. Otherwise, our education ain't worth anything, says Socrates. So he's making fun of Meno's teacher, Gorgias. So Meno can't give a definition. And by the way, this exercise of the dialectic, so long as it's a system of understanding and giving definitions, but so long as you're trying to define an aspect of being, it's also a meditation, because you are having sustained focus and concentration on an aspect of being which you can perceive directly. The realm of being is nous, knowable, ousia. So it can open yourself up for a out of body or a eternal experience. So there's no difference between thinking and meditation, which is amazing, because all of these people like Meno who are focused on gold and silver, these bankers and Wall Street dudes, they're experts at meditation. We all are. The only question is, what are we focusing on? Those people focus on money and define money and use their understanding to focus on money, but you can't join with it. You can't actually, it's not an aspect of being. Most human beings are focused on their internal dialogue that puts them down. You stink, your thinking stinks, your goal stinks, be a slave, be anxious, be afraid. You're meditating, but you're meditating like you're getting really good at focusing on that, but it's not a true voice. It's the kakadaemon, the negative daemon, the reflection of your false view of self and reality that you get from childhood, called the pathologos. That's what we focus on the other series we have on the channel, Philosophical Midwifery, how to get rid of that false idea of self and its functioning, that negative voice. But it's a meditation. The more you don't address it, the more you join with, or you can't actually join with it because it's not real, but the more you become like that false belief, that inner voice. It becomes your persona, it becomes your mask, and you become identified with it. That's the cause of our problems. But what we want to do is focus on real being, mind itself, and join with it and become like it. That's what we're doing here. Using the height of understanding, dialectic, focused on the height of reality, aspects of real being, so that we can understand it, come to a definition of what's excellent for everybody, so there's no need for war or conflict, but also directly experience it, contemplation. And if we recognize the model, the paradigm of how to do it, the dialectic, we can recognize where our friends are missing the mark. So if you say, hey, can you give me a definition of virtue, one of the real beings, and they aren't, and they can't, we can, okay, it's stage 2 that you're not doing really well. So a doctor has a paradigm of the healthy body. He can recognize people who are different. He can recognize all sorts of sickness. Your lungs are in the wrong place. You got too many eyes on your head. And I can recognize that because I know what a healthy body looks like. So too with understanding or meditation, same thing. Spirituality and philosophy, same thing. By understanding the paradigm. And Socrates has said, look, I've given you the paradigm. I've asked you to give me the whole of virtue, but you're still breaking it into parts because your definition of virtue is do whatever you do with justice. But justice is a part of virtue. Virtue has justice, has temperance, has courage, even holiness in a way. These are all parts of the virtue of excellence of the soul. So if you say virtue is to do whatever you do with, by the way, because everything you do you think is good. So his definition is to seek, to desire things that are good and to be able to get them. So everyone seeks things they think are good, so that's not a good, you can't distinguish better or worse people like that. So really, the difference is how well you're able to get the good things. For Meno, it's gold and silver. So how well can you get the good things? By the way, is it not just how well you can get them? Is it whether or not you get them in a just way? If you beat up an old lady to take her gold, do you have virtue? And Meno says, well, okay, no. All right. So you do whatever you want to do with justice. That's what it means to have virtue. And then Socrates says, hang on a second. You've already said that justice is a part of virtue. So you're saying here, every act is virtue if it is performed with a part of virtue. If virtue is doing anything with some justice, but justice is a part of virtue, then your definition is every act is virtue if it's performed with a part of virtue. But you've cut the definition into parts. So you have to start again from the beginning. To give the whole of virtue, not parts. That's where we are. In the chatty chat. With what is being said in the text about virtue being elusive due to ignorance or delusion of belief, yes. Or what we think is good for us but is actually bad, yes. Why aren't these virtues inherently apparent for us? Oh, good question. Why are we born having to learn? Why don't babies know everything? And next question, why aren't our parents completely wise? And so the crap that we learn as babies, as children, about what's true and what's good, why are they all wrong? Why do we have to unlearn what's false through philosophical midwifery and get into this text to learn the truth? Why do we have to learn? Why are we born at all? And why are 99% of the people like Meno? They think they know, and they're not happy with being ignorant, like aporia, being at a loss, being confused, and admit you don't know. Why is it alpha and sigma to be a big tough guy being angry and think you know everything you don't? When it's better to recognize you don't and be okay with not knowing, because that's the start of learning. These are good questions. We've already recognized that Meno's from a rich family. Can be hard for rich people to admit they're not better than others, because how will they justify their wealth? He spent a lot of money at a school, so it's hard for people who've got a degree to admit they don't know philosophy, or they don't know psychology, or they don't know whatever it is they know. They're not a good politician. They've got families and a culture that give them a big thumbs up. It can be hard for somebody loved by their culture and family to realize they don't know the crap that they got from their childhood. It's ignorance. Good question though, carry it with you. And so we are trying our best not only to understand it, but everything that we're learning as we go to apply it. So if this dialectic is the paradigm that Meno is failing to use, we are going to be better than Meno, and we're going to use it. So we've been trying to apply the dialectic as much as we can to the text itself. And we've done pretty well, actually. We've recognized a few different mini dialectics, and we've even recognized within the whole of the text, there seems to be sections that reflect the dialectic too. So we're really excited about that as we go. But there's another puzzle that has come to light for us that would have only come to light if we're doing that. In other words, we just came to a part of virtue. It's not virtue if the way you're doing it is lacking virtue. You can't beat up an old lady and get her money and say, oh, I'm good because I'm rich. You can't be just Jeff Bezos and exploit the most poor and vulnerable people and extract their value and abuse your workers to become a multi-billionaire like Jeff Bezos. Now, there are sycophants, bootlickers who say, oh no, Jeff Bezos is better than all of us because he's so rich, but he didn't get his wealth using justice. He used injustice. So is he really just? No. So, in that case, if we say, hey, it's just and virtuous for us to read Plato and the Meno, absolutely it is. But is it really virtue for us to read the Meno if we are not reading it in a virtuous way? That's our question for today. And if we're learning about virtue, that it's something to do with the dialectic, fundamentally, and that's the paradigm that Socrates wants us to use, then if we're not reading the Meno using the dialectic, is our reading of the Meno virtuous or vice? But another thing about having the paradigm is you can recognize deviations. Not only are we reading the Meno, which might be a good and virtuous, in a virtuous way, necessary, but we can discover new puzzles that people like Meno would have missed, like past teachers of philosophers would have missed, past translators of philosophy would have missed. And one such puzzle is this one. Right here. This is a huge one. And I guarantee that this puzzle you will not have seen in any other translation other than the Balboa. The Balboa translation is the best for that and many other reasons. What's the puzzle? Well, the puzzle is we want the whole of virtue. The parts of virtue are justice, temperance, holiness, and also courage, probably wisdom. But justice and temperance and holiness are real beings. They're real beings. They exist forever. They have a selfhood. They have a kind of intelligence. They have a higher level of being and reality than physical things do. They're able to be apprehended directly by us becoming them, joining with them. Mind minding mind, ousia ousia ing ousia, nous nousing nous. But if these are the real beings, but they're only parts of virtue, when we say we want the whole of virtue, what does that tell us? Maybe this virtue we're looking for is the whole of being.
Wow. Wow.
Let's draw it. So we've got a circle. Here's our circle. And in the circle we have eidos. Again, those who have done philosophy probably have been told that eidos is a concept or a form. All these bad translations. There are lots of Gorgiases of philosophy out there. And if you're a philosophy teacher, don't take it personally. Come on. Grow up. I mean that in a nice way. Like, yeah, of course. I was learning it too, so I had to go through this Aporia stuff. So, if this is being, this is being, which is also experienced as nous, and its nature is ousia. And it has these aspects, which is called the how do you spell it? Eidos. I'm gonna go with this Eidos. This is what has been mistranslated for 1500 years as forms. It ain't forms. It's Eidos, which means, by the way, to behold. In other words, you can grasp them. They are knowable. And my blackboard is frozen. And now it's working again. So here we go. It's to behold. That's what eidos means in the Greek, which means it's knowable. It's apprehended with our ousia. Ousia means turning back around on itself. So our ousia turns around. That activity is also ousia. And what does it know? Ousia. So it's ousia, ousiaing ousia, giving it a kind of oneness, meaning you are knowing yourself directly. And our puzzle is a question, which is good for aporia. We want to be puzzled by this as much as we can, because we just learnt that aporia, that is virtue, is that these are, let's use a ruler. Speaking of straight lines and compasses, if these are justice, temperance. I like temperance better than sound-mindedness. Too many syllables. Same thing though. Socrates. Temperance. Keeping your cool. Cool-headedness. Balance. Well-orderedness. If they are real beings, that's 79, no, that's our quote from 78E. If they are real beings, but also they are parts, or that's not how you spell parts. Parts or aspects, to use the word, of virtue. And he's just made fun of, no, he just said that Meno is making fun of him because he is saying, what's virtue? To do whatever you do with justice, which is a part of virtue. It's like saying, what's a bicycle? Oh, it's to use a part of a bicycle. What? What's it mean to ride a bike? Oh, it means to do whatever you do when you ride a bike with a part of a bike. What? You're crazy, man.
Flibbity-gibbity nonsense.
It's flibbity-gibbity nonsense. So he's saying, hey, because you're using a part or an aspect of virtue, and we want the whole, oh, what is it? The whole caboodle? No, the whole enchilada. I don't know what an enchilada is, but it sounds like a tasty sandwich. I want the whole hoagie. That's American for sandwich. We want the whole of virtue. Yes, whole of virtue. Let's have a look at it. 79C. We want the whole of virtue. So 79C. Therefore, okay, so this is an opportunity for us to practice, to do the virtuous thing, read the Meno, in a virtuous way. Managing self or whatever you're managing using the dialectic. So can we see the dialectic here? Well, we have some definitions. This is definition. This is a definition. You could say the aspects are demonstrations of the whole. If this is being, how does it demonstrate? How does it function? Well, it has these as functions. You can function with justice or temperance. Is this the division? Dividing it up into the puzzle, the arguments, which we need for the puzzle. What's the puzzle? Well, the puzzle is, these are the parts of virtue, but we want the whole of virtue. We are following the paradigm that Socrates laid out, like he did with his definition of shapes and colors. Therefore, this could be the conclusion, the synthesis. Therefore, what's the insight? Therefore, what are we after? Therefore, we want for virtue we want and virtue is two things. The whole of being. Wow.
Wow.
Hooray! We gained an insight. And we gained it in a way where we can understand. My pen fell. Okay, I'll deal with the pen later. In a way that we can understand it, we can recognize it, we knew how we got there, and hopefully you'll be able to walk somebody through this yourself. Walk yourself through it, practicing the dialectic. That's a meditation. Preparing yourself for experiencing well-being or enlightenment, but also walk your friend over it, over a lovely coffee. How you text your friend, say, hey, let's meet up for a coffee, and let me walk you through these steps of this dialectic. Leading you to the conclusion that what is virtue, what is the excellence of the soul, isn't even directly apprehending nous, justice or beauty or temperance or all the other things that we learn in philosophy. We're learning about these. What we learn about in philosophy, we're gathering parts, puzzle pieces. The excellence of our soul isn't the parts or the real beings, which are the parts of virtue. We want the whole of virtue. So the excellence or virtue of our soul is to be able to apprehend the whole of being. You'll be working with justice. You'll have holiness. You'll have even-temperedness, temperance. You'll have courage and wisdom. You'll have all of these. You'll be acting most beautifully if you are acting with the whole. So what's a bicycle? Oh, to have a steering wheel and have a handlebars and a bike chain. That's a crappy definition. Technically, it's not wrong. If you are riding a bike, you are using a handlebars and a bike chain, but you're also using 2 tires. You're also using the pedals. You're also using the little bell that you ring. And you also have the tassels on the side if you're cool. And the pegs where you can, people you can stand on at the back and double them. In other words, if you have a whole understanding of a bike, you'll be using all those parts anyway. Effortlessly. You don't have to think about the tassels and the handlebar. You'll be using it if you know how to ride a bike as a whole. So if we're asking for what does it mean to have the excellence of the soul, you are looking for the virtue. The virtue is the whole. The virtue has, if you are acting with excellence and virtue, you will have justice, you will have temperance, you'll be managing the self with the dialectic. Always. Therefore, the thing that we're seeking, the thing that Meno was asking, can this be taught, is the nous and ousia, the initiation, the mystical experience, the knowing of the whole of being, the understanding of the whole of being, the integration and functioning with the whole of being. Wow! So, we've got a new question. A new question is, how the heck aporia for us, we don't know, which is what? How the heck can you have virtue? And we're working with, what does it mean to have? Have or have understand, because you need the paradigm. 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 No. Nous, because that's the mystical experience. Which he mentioned, it was a tragedy that Meno hasn't got yet. We'll put knowing here because just, I don't know, put nous and knowing because just to remind us what nous means. Which is the mystical experience. One of my favorite Super Nintendo games was the Mystical Ninja. Mystical experience. So I hope the Mystical Ninja had the mystical experience, which we are recognizing as the whole of being and, well, the whole of it. So let's hope he had the whole mystical experience. So how can we understand using the paradigm, know with the mystical experience, and function with and function with all of which maybe is question, is that definition, demonstration, division? Question for you. How can you have or understand, know, and function with the whole of being? What? How can you do that? How can you have the whole of being and understand it and function with it? That sounds crazy. I don't have a drop. I need more drops. If you are loving this channel and you were thinking to yourself, I wish Jet had more sound drops. Well, I'm out of space on my little touchpad thing here. If you want to donate to the channel, please email me. If you want to buy me a really big soundboard thing, or a better camera, or some better lights or whatever, if you know about that stuff and you think, I'd much enjoy seeing Jed's beautiful face. Notice I made a joke that uplifted me and didn't put me down. My impulse, because I'm Australian, is to say my ugly mug, but I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to practice to be more virtuous towards myself. My beautiful mug. It would be much better to look at it if there was some better lighting. I just have like a $10 ring light thing here. Then you're more than welcome to make the experience better for yourself by donating a better camera. I'm just using a webcam. Donating better lights. Donating a bigger soundboard button thing. And if you do, I'll make use of all of it. I am not friends with the King of Persia, so unlike Meno, so I can't afford those things right now. But if you want to donate, send me an email. I'm sure there's I think there's a thing. I've seen Twitch streamers say, if you want to donate to the channel, you can buy me this. You buy me this. Normally they're very attractive women, which I am not. But you're welcome to, and I will make use of them. But I don't have a. I want to press. That's crazy. Someone's saying that. Maybe that guy who sings that song about you think I'm crazy. If I can say this.
Flibbity jibbity nonsense.
What in the heck are we talking about?
Come on, man.
That's the best I can do.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
And my favorite one, Joe Rogan saying he doesn't want to eat a monkey. That makes me laugh for some reason. So our question is, how do you do that? How do you have the whole of being? Not just experience beauty itself, or justice itself, or being itself, or being itself, or any of these aspects that we're learning. How do you have the whole of it? Because that's what we're asking Meno to give us, the whole of it. And if it's a virtue, we want to have it. It's the excellence of our soul. And understand it. And function with it. In other words, to be able to do things virtuously. So that's a big question we have. So good for us. We have aporia. Now, what happens if we do have aporia? If we are practicing what we're preaching, if we are doing virtue while reading about virtue, if we are demonstrating virtue while defining it. Oh, by the way, if we're demonstrating it while we're defining it, we are doing the dialectic. How important is the dialectic to virtue? It's key. It's one of the key things that we've got so far. It's one of the only things we've got so far. Like actual positive descriptions. So how important is it for us to be doing that? And to have gotten this question? Well, let's see. Let's keep reading. With that question in mind, let's read the rest of the paragraph. So let's read it from the start. Is it not the case, then, that it results from what you've agreed upon, that this is virtue, to do whatever one does with a part of virtue? You say that justice and each of these are a part of virtue. Are you playing with me, boy? Playing with me, son? Because of my pleading to say about the whole of virtue? You are far from explaining what self is. Whereas you say that every act is virtue, right? Because everyone does what they think is good. if indeed it's performed with a part of virtue, with justice. Thus answering just as if you had already told me what the whole of virtue is. Like, what's a bike? Oh, it's like when you ride a bike. You're acting as though you've already told me what a bike is. Even when you cut yourself up to parts. All you've given me is a bike chain. Therefore, it appears to me we have to start from the beginning. You have to start from the beginning. From the same question, what is virtue? All right, what did Meno ask? Can virtue be taught? What's Socrates saying he can't do and has demonstrated he can't do? Define what it is. How can you talk about whether it can be taught if you don't know what it is? How can you talk about its quality if you don't know what it is? Oh, how can you talk about its quality if you don't know what it is? How can you talk about its parts if you don't know what it is? How can you talk? How can you talk about justice and temperance and any of the real beings in philosophy if we don't know what it is? How can you talk about parts of a bike if you don't know what a bike is? How can you talk about the things that we seek in philosophy, justice, temperance, any of the real beings, if you don't know what the whole of being is? What does that mean? We need to know the whole of being. We need to grasp being, or ousia, as the highest possible way, the whole of it. Don't experience enlightenment as beauty itself, or justice itself, or any of these things that people have. Brilliant light, eternity, the culmination of evolution. People explain it in these sorts of ways. We need the whole of it. Otherwise, how can we really understand these, talk about these, and understand these parts? Equally so for politicians. If you talk about justice, how can you talk about justice if it's a part of being without knowing the whole of being? Fairness or justice within the economy. How can you talk about that, economist or rich person, if you don't know the whole of it? Artist, you're trying to talk about what beauty is. How can you know what beauty is if it's an aspect of an eidos, one of the real beings, if you don't know the whole of real being? So if all of us who claim to be an expert on anything must necessarily apprehend the whole of being, and on a lesser scale, Meno is asking, can virtue be taught? How can you talk about its quality, its teachability, if you don't know what virtue is? Every single teacher. Should we have grades? How do we teach things? How can you, as an educational person, formerly called a teacher, how can you talk about the qualities of how well you can teach if you don't know what education is as a whole? What's education? Well, we know what it's not. Something that lacks the experience of the whole of being. That's the comedic tragedy of Meno's education. He didn't have the mystical experience, or nous, or ousia, which is to apprehend the whole of being. So any educational person, you talk about whether or not education can be taught, or how well should we have homework, should we have grades? How can you talk about its quality if you don't know what education is for as a whole? If knowing is as a whole, if understanding is a whole, these are the things you're supposed to teach. How do you know the truth? How do you understand the truth? How do you function with the truth? That's what you do at school, right? Isn't it? How to understand things, how to know things, and how to function with it as a human being. That's having it. Therefore, if you are not only a politician or an economist, if you are a teacher of any kind, your job is to, as a human being, have the whole of being. Understand it with the paradigm Socrates is laying out. Experience it as nous. That's the mystical experience, the tragedy if you don't have that, says Socrates. It's also a joke. But also function with it as Socrates is demonstrating. Definition, demonstration, and division. So there's no getting around it. Not only is this the virtue of our soul as a human being, if you're like, oh, I don't really care about what my purpose is as a human being, I'm going to lose myself in my work. I'm going to be a good teacher. part of my pen that broke. Sitting on it. I want to be a politician. I want to be an economist. I want to be a rich person. I want to be famous for being a politician. I want to be a rich capitalist. How can you talk about that unless in other words, you can't escape it. Anything you do. How can you talk about justice? How can you talk about education? How can you talk about wealth? Because Socrates threw wealth in there. That was interesting that he did that, by the way. He might have been anticipating that Meno was going to talk about gold and silver, and he used the Greek word of wealth that doesn't just mean health, gold and silver, but can be something in being. Just as health doesn't have to be physical health, it can be health itself. Same thing with strength and size. You can have a tall woman, but size itself doesn't just apply to women. Socrates has already gone through that. So same thing with health and wealth and size and strength. These are things that have an eternal existence. So whatever you're doing, wealth, you capitalists, justice, you politicians, education, you teachers, how can you talk about, well, first of all, you can't be doing it well unless you have to have gotten and functioning with it in a just way, otherwise it's vice. But how can you even claim to be an expert on those things which are parts if you don't know the whole? That's Meno. So whether we are a human who's being rational and mature and wanting to understand our purpose as a whole, the virtue or excellence of our soul, what we're here to do on the quest of being a human, or even if you're ignoring that true purpose and you're being a teacher or a judge or a banker, either way, you have the same job if you are wanting to do it with virtue. If you're not wanting to be a vice, we wouldn't say evil person, but a bad person. Functioning with vice. What's our job? All of us, to know the whole of being. To know it, to understand it with the paradigm, to know it in the direct experience, and to function with it. So our question is, for all of us, everywhere, whenever you are, wherever you are, what species you are, doesn't really matter. What planet you're on, what time you're watching this video. If there are aliens watching this, well, welcome, or glip glip, which is funny that we think aliens speak like that, but glip glip glip, which is alien for welcome, and I hope you're enjoying this. And if you're a future race, hello, I don't know, what would you say to someone from the future? I hope you're enjoying this too. This is true for all of us. So our question, which is giving us aporia, I hope, is how the heck can you have the whole of being and understand it and know it and function with it? That's our question. And now we know it applies to everybody. Ain't no escaping it. So yeah, and use that in your conversation with the I don't know, the guru at the Buddhist temple, or the imam at the mosque, or the priest at the Catholic whatever, or the preacher at your evangelist Christian, or the philosophy teacher at the university, or whoever, any one of them. You can't escape this. You can't say, well, that's just for you philosophers. No, it ain't. For all of you guys. All of us should have this question. And we do, and let's keep reading. So therefore, you must start from the beginning, from the same question, what is virtue? If every act performed along with a part of virtue will be virtue. For this is what it means when someone says that every act performed along with justice is virtue. It's a part. Or does it appear to you that there is no need? So what's the question we're carrying? How do we have the whole of being? It's more easy to understand how can you experience beauty itself. You're experiencing pure symmetry and order and proportion all at once, and all that sort of stuff. There's beauty. Pure timelessness. Oh, you're experiencing all time all at once. Yeah, You can understand that, but how can you experience all of that? The whole. Okay? Or does it appear to you that there is no need to start from the beginning for the same question? Do you think that anyone can know whatever virtue is when they don't know self? So this started off as something that didn't quite make sense. So repeating himself, if he means itself, how can you know whatever virtue is if you don't know what virtue is? That doesn't make sense. It's a tautology, repeating yourself. So what does it mean if you don't know self? Oh. So we started with a puzzle, given us aporia. We were okay with aporia. We didn't run from aporia or make excuses not to have aporia or pretend that we know things we don't know because we've got a job or money or a title or a PhD. We're okay with being aporia, so we could have a question. And now we went back to the text and applied the dialectic because that's what we're learning about virtue. We're demonstrating what we're defining. And now we have a question and this, and something that stood out. What's our question? How do you have the whole of being? So what's the whole of being? Let's draw it. Let's make it yellow because it's often experienced as the brilliant light of pure being. So if that's the whole of being, put it here. How can you have the whole of being? And the whole of being has a scope over there's the creation of the physical world. We'll make that brown. Do I have a brown? It's the closest to brown I got. So this is our physical world. Let's use a physical. And this is the realm of being, which has the aspects. So how can you have the whole of being? Well, how could you grasp the whole of the physical world? One of the principles that we've been talking about is to gain mastery over something, you have to be functioning at a higher cognitive level. So in philosophical midwifery, we talk about the realm of beliefs causing our problems, our pathologos beliefs. You can't, so the Einsteinian quote, you can't solve a problem with the same mode of thinking that caused it. And we understand it as, you can't solve problems caused by beliefs, all of the problems in our physical world, specifically the pathologos, using beliefs. You can't throw Judaism at Muslimism and beat and solve any of the problems caused by Muslim beliefs. Are there problems in Muslim beliefs? You betcha. Can you genocide it away, says the Israeli state? No. Because what are you operating from? Just more beliefs, just Jewish beliefs. You can't beliefs yourself out of beliefs. You have to go to a higher level. We call that understanding. So we are understanding the art of midwifery. Let's move it over a little bit. So you need understanding, which applies to philosophical midwifery, which is the understanding of the nature of beliefs, and also philosophy, which is the understanding of understanding. Use that to solve the problems of belief because it's a higher cognitive level. So too, metaphysically, you could grasp the whole of the physical world because what did we just say that was? One of the aspects of being is, we call it eternity. because being is outside of time and space, which is the characteristic. Eternity, which is the characteristic of the characteristics of the physical world. So if you can experience one of the eidos, the aspects of being, eidos, like eternity, that, zoom in a little bit. So this is an experience of one of the eidos of the realm of being we call eternity, which allows you to grasp all of the physical world all at once. So by operating from a higher metaphysical level or cognitive level, both, because this is nous, and this realm down here is opinion or beliefs. No, we've got it over here, same thing. Oh, so let's put, because we've already got it, let's put nous on the same side. Because nous is greater even than understanding. Well, that's a bit iffy. That's a puzzle. I'm not gonna make that claim. I'm not gonna die on that hill. Understanding can apply to both the physical world and the world of being. When used in that way, but let's say nous up here, this is our, so we could say this and this is ontology, what exists. This and this is epistemology, how do we perceive those things that exist, cognitive functions. So our question is, you can perceive the physical world through the eidos of eternity all at once, as a whole. You can grasp the nature of beliefs as a whole through understanding. That's what we've been doing in philosophical midwifery. Now, philosophy applies to this, so we could maybe rearrange these two, because philosophical midwifery is philosophy is literally understanding applied to being. That's why all of our questions have been about being in the Meno so far. And whenever, which is a paradigm, so understanding that would be understanding part of the paradigm, which is why we can recognize whenever Meno slips up, whenever he stops talking about the realm of being and points to physical things he likes, being good to friends, harming your enemies, having gold and silver, having honor and offices, having a quote from a poet he likes, or we might say today a religious text that we like, philosophy. Of course he's missing the mark, because he's in the physical world. That's why Socrates points out, no joke. So philosophy goes that way. And philosophical midwifery, which we're also doing on this channel together. Hope you're enjoying that as well. Goes down. So our question is, how do we grasp the whole of nous? So what are we looking for? We're looking for, let's move it down a little bit to make some space. An ontology and an epistemology. Should we put those fancy words? Okay, let's do it. So we'll say ontology, which is a fancy word for what exists, what is, and epistemology, ology. Lots of O's in that word. Too many. Epistemology, which is cognitive functions, or how we know. Cognitive, like what things we can do with our mind. Cognitive functions, I like that expression, cognitive functions. Okay, so we're looking for an ontology and epistemology, a level of existence and a way of thinking that's beyond here. What's beyond here? What color? What color? Here. This is our question. So our question is, how can you grasp the whole of being? Because virtue is the whole of being. Right there. Virtue is the whole. Now, if you have been following along with this channel this far, this isn't a surprise, because this is baked into many of the words we've been describing. The word altos, the word good, and some other ones. The word altos and good refer to the self. So what is the epistemological and cognitive, or no, the epistemological is cognitive. What's the level of being, a level of existence, and a way of thinking? The self. The self. We're looking for the self. How else can we grasp the whole of that which is below it? You can't. So we have a question. What is the what kind of existence is the self, and how do we know? Or apprehend? Apprehend. Yeah. I don't use the word it. Yes, fine. How do we know or apprehend it? What kind of existence or ontology is the self? How do we know, apprehend it? That's a cognitive function. That's epistemology, ontology, and epistemology. Because we are dealing with Meno's beliefs, but also Socrates' understanding. Are we going to settle for Socrates, or are we going to seek excellence, virtue? So in other words, is there a level of cognitive functioning that will allow us to grasp Socrates and Meno? That's the question. Isn't it wild that Socrates might be demonstrating a level of virtue while also encouraging us to go beyond him? Just like the Phaedo. He says, hey, I am, Iolus is Hercules' trusty nephew. How do I pronounce Iolus? Iolus. Pronunciation. Iolaus. Socrates in the Phaedo says, I am Iolaus, the trusty assistant of Hercules. You are the hero of the story. You watching this, you are the hero of the story. Socrates is Iolaus, helping you. Which means what? If Meno is functioning at this level, which is a question, these are all questions we're taking. If Socrates is operating at this level, allowing him to apprehend the nature of his beliefs and where he's wrong, passing on the paradigm of understanding which can be applied to this being, that's the paradigm, the dialectic that Meno is not picking up, but Socrates is using. if he is doing this and giving us a question, apprehending the whole of virtue, could he be functioning like Aeolus and saying, hey, the sort of thing you want to demonstrate, I'm not going to give you? Because maybe virtue can't be taught in that way. If virtue is a way of being, then if I teach you in the way Meno wants it, like he said, hey, even a blindfolded man can say you're good looking because you're demanding answers. If I just give you answers or advice, that's just going to be a belief. That's not virtue. If you understand the nature of virtue, that might not be virtue either. You'd be able to apprehend the parts of being to understand justice, understand holiness, understand temperance. But even if I give you the paradigm of the dialectic to understand it, that's better than Meno. But that's not the whole of virtue. So even if I'm defining and demonstrating this, that's not good enough because that's not virtue. Virtue is the whole. Therefore, I'm not going to give you a definition. I'm not going to give you a demonstration of what virtue is. I'm going to give you what you need to recognize that you need to yourself. Can't be taught. You need to, for yourself, define virtue from this level. Demonstrate. Know it directly yourself. Socrates is telling us to go beyond Socrates in this text. Is that wild?
Wow.
Owen Wilson thinks so.
Wow.
Joe Rogan thinks he's going to stop what he's doing.
I want to eat a monkey.
He's not going to eat a monkey because he's going to do this instead.
I want to eat a monkey.
Wow.
Do you find it interesting? Is that a puzzle? Does that come forward? How else can we grasp the whole of being, which is virtue, unless we are able to do so from a higher cognitive function, from a higher level of existence? Can you teach that? What's the name for that higher level of existence? Autos, self. What's the text? How can you ever know what virtue is when you do not know self? Confetti. Where's my confetti? Confetti. What an insight. Congratulations if you've come along this far and you follow that and you've come to that insight as well, because that's the thing about reading. The insights you get for yourself, but the text can help, what's the word? Not confirm, but help give you a thumbs up like this. Just like my screen can give you a thumbs up. Like you're on the right track. Whoops. What did I just... Oh, this one here. In other words, it's in the text, but it's only in the text that in a way that you would only have seen it if you were doing it. By the way, if you were reading it in any other way other than doing it, looking for puzzles, looking for aporia, using the paradigm, looking for deviations from the paradigm, looking for extended applications of the paradigm, the dialectic, if you were not reading it in that way, literally, the text is saying you're not getting the good thing. You can't get the good thing unless you're doing it in the good way. You can't have virtue unless you're doing it virtually. So it's a kind of, I don't know, qualifier. There are some restaurants that are all-you-can-eat restaurants, but you can't get in there unless you can fit through a really small door. Because I don't want overweight people eating all of the food. I don't know if that exists. But something like that, you have to pay more depending on what door you fit through. I've seen that before on the internet. In other words, you can't get this insight unless you're doing it. And if you're not doing it, you're not practicing virtue. You're like this rich, good-looking brat who's demanding the answers the way we want the answers from the teacher, from the textbook. That's our education. That's the piggy bank model of education. We are an empty piggy bank and we pay money to the teacher and they put the coins in us. That's not education. That's garbage. Leading to a garbage world with garbage leaders and garbage economists and garbage politicians and garbage teachers, garbage philosophy teachers, garbage psychotherapists. That's not personal. Don't take it personal. Be unlike Meno, get into euphoria. We have to do better as a race. A race is built up of teachers and politicians and economists and so on and so on. So if you are one of those in particular, don't be precious. You think the world is the way it is because all of the parts are functioning well? No, the world as a whole is the way it is because the parts are the way they are. The parts are teachers and judges and economists and philosophers and psychotherapists and stuff. In other words, all of the parts are lacking this. All of our professions need to improve. How do we do so? The logos. Learning the paradigm of climbing the levels of what is and how we understand to be virtuous, because we don't know virtue. We don't understand virtue yet. Any of our professions, that's the next level of human evolution, by definition, that we can see for ourselves. This ain't a belief or opinion. This is something we are understanding, but we don't just have to understand it, we have to do it ourselves. And if you weren't reading in this way, you wouldn't have gotten it. So if you've come along this far, good for you.
Wow.
So what was our conclusion? In order to know the whole of virtue, how can you know whatever virtue is if it's the whole of being, if you don't know self? So what is so far on page 14, what is the instruction or the quest of the text? Is it anything to do with what dumb rich boy Meno wants to know? Hey, tell me whether or not we can teach virtue like I have. What does every politician say? The same thing. I know what it means to be good. I know what virtue is. How do I teach it? How do I run a society that way? What is every school principal? I know what virtue is. How do I teach it? What is every economist? I know what it means to be a good functioning member of society. How do I have more money so I can have more influence? Every lobbyist, same thing. Every politician, same thing. What's everyone in our society doing? Meno. What's Socrates saying? Hey, it's garbage. You're garbage. He didn't say you're garbage, but it's garbage. Drop it. Be aporia. Be completely at a loss, because that's virtue. Now, what is he saying do next? Understanding. Get the paradigm down. Use it. If you follow, what will you realize? Virtue is beyond even that. Because dianoia, virtue, is to directly apprehend the various different mystical experiences which you can recognize as the various different aspects of being. If you're in a spiritual tradition which doesn't have the logos or understanding, you won't recognize the differences. You won't be able to understand it. Make that point to your local Buddhist guru. See what he says. Don't. I mean, you could. As a practice of the dialectic, sure, see how you go. But what else is he saying? Hey, with that paradigm, you need to go to a different level. Why? You need to not just understand and know the aspects of being, the same way you can understand the whole of the physical world by the experience of the eidos of eternity, or experience the whole of all of the beauty that exists in the physical world by the eidos of beauty, or all justice that can exist in the physical world by the eidos of justice. These are all real beings, which are plural, part of real being, which is the whole. That's virtue. Virtue is the whole. How do you apprehend and understand and know and function with the whole? That's the question. Socrates says, how can you know what virtue is if it's the whole of being, if you aren't on this level, which is the self? Can that be taught? Can you teach someone to be the self? What would you tell them? How could you teach someone to be themselves? Well, you might say, well, that's midwifery, isn't it? You can't teach someone to be themselves. That's just the self. You can use philosophical midwifery to address the false beliefs that they've been carrying from childhood, to think that God is up here and themselves are below here, less than God because they're a sinner. Or maybe dad and mum is up here, but they are less because they wanted a nice Cinderella slave in the family. Or authority figures and Trump and Netanyahu and all these people who are angry bastards and Putin, you name it, they're up here, but we are just we are below. Or Musk and Bezos are up here because we need to lick their boots and spend our lives working to make them richer, which is what we do, because money is relative. If you're earning $10 an hour and your boss is earning $100 an hour, you are literally making yourself not $10 richer, you are making yourself $90 poorer. The unemployed people, you're making $100 poorer because money is relative to what's in the pool. Literally, it's worse than slavery. It's slavery with more steps, you could say. You're working, but you're making, yeah, it is. It's slavery with more steps. You're making yourself poorer every dollar you make in capitalism, which is wild. So all of these are false beliefs that put you less than God, less than the universe, less than intelligence, less than anyone else, mum, dad, grandpa, the local priest, your local imam, the local rabbi. These are all false beliefs that function to put the self lower. It's a belief about the self that puts you down. So how do you teach someone to be the self? Philosophical midwifery. You can't teach them to be the self. You can help them to develop an understanding, apply it to their false beliefs, to free themselves from their false beliefs, to illuminate or give rise to or clear away what prevents their natural being of self. You could say that, and you wouldn't be wrong. But being free of what's false, how will you recognize it if you don't also have some sort of understanding and learning? Two different things, right? How can you be a healthy athlete unless you go to the doctor and fix your broken arm? You can't. But hey, fixing your broken arm doesn't make you a healthy athlete. You have to use that freedom from what's false, the potential to climb that ladder, along with some sort of learning to be able to recognize the self when you get there and understand it, recognize what kind of existence it has, recognize the way in which you know it, but also to function with it virtuously. In this life, at all times, and in the next, and on other planets, and with alien species, and at whatever level of being you are. Therefore, it's a kind of learning we must be here to do, because it's the only kind of learning we can take with us beyond our incarnation in the physical world. That's called being mature and rational. So, how do you teach someone to be the self if that's virtue? Well, you can help practice philosophical midwifery with them. Read along on our channel. We have that up on the YouTube. And you can join the Discord community to find like-minded people to practice the art with. But also, you got to be doing philosophy too, to use that freedom from what limits you in the progression towards the ultimate nature of the self, beyond even being. What's that mean? Beyond even God. Ooh, what a blasphemer you are. The guy in the funny hat who's very angry and has all these other problems that are well documented told me that I'm less than God. And it's bad to think I'm better than God. Bollocks. Does he know philosophy? No. Has he done midwifery? No. That's garbage. But he has a funny hat. Doesn't matter. You can buy a funny hat, but he has followers. Doesn't matter. Putin has followers. Elon Musk has followers. Doesn't mean they're right. Hitler had followers. Well, what makes things right? That's the question. How do you teach understanding? Socrates is outlining the paradigm. He's giving us opportunities to practice it. And he is saying, literally, I can give you this philosophy, understanding. That is the doorway to experiencing the aspects of being. That's education. But the question we have is, how can we apprehend the whole of it? And we know from this already that you can apprehend the whole of the physical world through the eidos of eternity. From a higher physical level, you can understand the whole of beliefs through the understanding of philosophy and midwifery, allowing you to fix problems of beliefs. That's true psychotherapy, by the way. The same way we say we need to upgrade psychotherapy, that's philosophical midwifery. We need to upgrade philosophy, that's reading the Balboa text the way we're doing it, practicing it, doing it. So that's how we apprehend this, how we would function well as a race, as human beings, and how to fix problems caused by belief. That's understanding. But if we were to go beyond that, because again, we talk about the physical world as a metaphor, that's the lesser. The greater is your soul. The soul has much greater capacity. It doesn't matter if Putin and Netanyahu and Elon Musk all getting on board. You can still do your job here. That's the primary important thing. That's the lesser. So if we were to go beyond the lesser to the greater, our souls, we can understand our physical world and the problems caused by false beliefs in the pathologos by developing understanding, philosophy and philosophical midwifery. But how then do we grasp the whole of this dimension and the whole of nous? If that is how we are understanding, and we have understood and seen and recognized for ourselves, is the nature of virtue. If the virtue of our souls isn't functioning with justice or beauty or temperance, these are aspects. If the excellence of you and your soul and what is true virtue is to understand, apprehend, know, and function with the whole, how can you do that at that same level? You can't. You have to go to a higher level. What's the name for the higher metaphysical level beyond even being? That's the self. That's the first hypothesis of Parmenides, which will allow you to grasp as a whole not only the physical world, but being itself. Can you teach that? I don't know. Is Socrates demonstrating that? I don't know. He seems to be demonstrating this. So maybe we have characters. So maybe we can put Meno here, put Socrates here. Definitely. He said virtue is keeping your eye on the eidos of being while doing dialectic, which is the paradigm of understanding. So Socrates seems to be functioning with this level. And if he is, like he said in the Phaedo, what's the guy's name? The assistant to Hercules. Iolaus. In other words, he's saying, hey, look, and by the way, this is good writing. There is the narrative that everybody sees. There is the twist at the end of the film, but then there's the secret third question you have to go on YouTube to find out.
He didn't know what solipsism.
But hey, that's just a theory.
A film theory YouTube site. And that's what we are discovering. If Meno is here, Socrates is here, we need to be here. How do we get there? Can it be taught? Socrates can maybe teach us the paradigm of that, to reach that, but can you teach this? Can you teach people to be the self? Can you teach people to, let's get rid of this. Can you teach people to know the self? To reach the level of existence of self? Can you teach people how exactly you would apprehend it? If this is apprehended as nous, and our physical world is apprehended through beliefs and opinions, how do you apprehend the self? If this is the object of knowing and understanding, and our physical world, which is why we have problems, is just a level of beliefs, what's the level of apprehending the self that would allow us to grasp as a whole being? How do we apprehend it, and what kind of existence it is, and what the heck does it mean that it's the self, that it's literally the most immediate and intimate essence of you? And of course, can it be taught? How can it be taught? So many questions. So many questions. So hopefully we are in a lot of aporia given this reflections. Because how can you know whatever virtue is if you don't know the self? What is the self? How do we know it? How will we get there? Can Socrates help us there? What the heck? Because if you don't have the self, you don't have virtue. So many questions. Oh my goodness. And we're only on page 14 of 48. Okay then, what is the self? How do we know it? How do we function with it? Can it be taught? What does Socrates say after he says this? After he's given us this question? Tune in next time. I've left you in a lot of aporia. Oh my God. Hopefully you'll be comfortable in it for a while, because that's the end of the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed the aporia and puzzlement. I hope you've come along and you've had fun being puzzled. I hope you're okay with being puzzled until the next episode. I hope you're seeing some beauty and fun and coolness and radness in the way Socrates functions, and the way this text is written, and why this is such a fantastic text. Like, probably, I talk about Christopher Nolan and maybe a couple of other filmmakers who make films with those three levels of meaning, and they're known as the best of all of them, the excellence of filmmakers. But this book, man, Socrates is on a whole different level, but a level that we are benefiting from by getting these sorts of puzzles and questions that are more significant than a movie, because it's literally about your purpose here. What are you here for? What are you as a self and soul? What's the excellence or virtue of soul? How do you get it? These are the questions we're carrying. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have fun in your confusion, and I hope to see you next time. And thank you for those joining on the chat and Twitch.